Welcome to our deep dive into the beauty of Nepal. We're working with an excerpt today called Pasted Text, and it describes Nepal as paradise on earth. So
Yeah.
we're going to explore all the things that make this place so unique and beautiful.
It's really cool how pasted text goes beyond just, the surface level. It looks at that connection that the people have with the environment, which we'll be looking at more throughout this deep dive.
Yeah, I love that about these deep dives,
Huh.
you know, uncovering those hidden layers. Speaking of layers, we have to start with the Himalayas. Nepal is home to 8 of the 14 highest peaks in the world,
Hmm.
including Mount Everest, or Sagarmatha, as the locals call it. And it's really woven into their culture.
Yeah, it's not just mountains, they're considered sacred, like abodes of the gods. And it shapes how they see the world. Like if you think about these popular treks like Everest Base Camp or the Annapurna Circuit, they're not just physical journeys, they're spiritual journeys through rhododendron forests and alpine meadows and these really charming mountain villages.
Yeah, it's like taking a step back in time to a place where the modern world hasn't really touched. But it's not just about, you know, scaling the peaks, right? Pasted text also mentions these beautiful valleys.
Yeah, the valleys, they offer a sense of tranquility that contrasts with these big, grand mountains. Like the Kathmandu Valley, it's a valley surrounded by lush hills, and it has these ancient temples and stupas, and this unique Newari architecture.
Wow, I can just imagine the carvings and the colors. It must be like a living museum. And then there's Pokhara Valley,
Mm.
which is known as the City of Lakes. I wonder what Pasted Text has to say about this region.
It describes it as a place of serene beauty, with these lakes like Fewa, Benyas, and Rupa. And they're just like mirrors reflecting the mountains. But what's also interesting is that they also talk about the terraced fields here.
Oh yeah, the terrace fields. They're beautiful, but they're also functional, right?
Exactly. Pasted text talks about how they show like this deep understanding of the land. They create this visual mosaic and provide food. It's that harmony between humanity and nature.
It's like humans adapting to this landscape while also respecting it. So we have mountains and valleys. What about something a little more um, dynamic? What about the rivers?
Yeah, the rivers, these incredible waterways like Trishuli, Gandaki, and Koshi, they all come from the Himalayas. And they're these powerful forces that shape the land, giving life to the valleys. And, they offer some opportunities for adventure.
Yeah, I bet. Whitewater rafting. I can just imagine. I bet Pasted Text has some great descriptions.
Oh, yeah. It talks about navigating these waterways
Hmm.
with the Himalayas in the background. And then there's these waterfalls like Davis Falls and Pokhara,
Right.
which is stunning and also has all these myths associated with it.
It seems like everywhere you look in Nepal, there's a story. But what about the animals that live in these places? The source mentions that Nepal has incredible biodiversity.
Oh, yeah. It's a haven for plants and animals, including endangered species. Pasted text highlights this, talking about animals like the Bengal tiger, the one-horned rhinoceros, and the snow leopard. All these animals thrive in protected areas, like Chitwan and Bardia National Parks, which are also UNESCO World Heritage Sites.
It's amazing. It's like a nature documentary in real life. And the source also talks about how diverse and vibrant the forests in Nepal are.
Right. There's everything from rhododendrons and oaks to pines and orchids, and they even describe the rhododendrons blooming in spring, and the hillsides just turn into this explosion of color.
It's like the land itself is celebrating the changing seasons. And speaking of celebrations, the source also talks about these beautiful lakes, describing them as jewels against the rugged terrain. What details does it give?
Well, it describes Fewa Lake in Pokhara. It has this crystal clear water and reflects the Annapurna Range. It's this place of peace and serenity, which contrasts with the energy of the mountains. And it mentions Rara Lake, which is Nepal's biggest lake. And they call it heaven on earth because it's so beautiful and surrounded by wilderness.
That sounds incredible. What else?
It talks about how these lakes, like Telika Lake, which is one of the highest lakes in the world, aren't just beautiful, but they're also really important to the local communities, spiritually and culturally. There are all these myths and rituals associated with them.
So we've talked about mountains and valleys and rivers and lakes. But there's another side to Nepal, isn't there? Something different from the terrain we've been talking about?
Are you talking about the Terai region?
Yes. What's his Pasted Text have to say about it?
It describes it as this flat, fertile plain covered in forests and grasslands, very different from the Himalayas. It's a great example of how diverse Nepal is.
And it has a ton of wildlife too, right?
Yeah. Like Chitwan and Bardia National Parks. They're home to Bengal tigers, one-horned rhinoceroses, and tons of birds. It just adds another dimension to Nepal's beauty.
It's amazing how many different landscapes can fit into one country. But Pasted Text highlights something else that sets Nepal apart.
That connection between the people and nature.
Yes. What does it say?
It says it's not just appreciation, it's reverence. Their culture, religion, and everyday lives are all connected to nature. Mountains are seen as homes of the gods, rivers give life, and forests are sacred.
It's a whole way of life.
Yeah, and you see this reflected in their festivals and traditions and even just how they live sustainably.
It makes you think that we could all learn a lot from them,
Mm-hmm.
especially when the world is facing so many environmental problems. But speaking of learning, we should also talk about the adventurous side of Nepal.
Right. Pasted text calls Nepal a playground for adventurers.
So it's not just admiring the beauty from afar. You can get out there and experience it. What kinds of adventures does it talk about?
Well, it mentions trekking and mountaineering, like the Annapurna and Everest regions, which are world famous.
But that's not just about physical strength, is it? I'm sure there's a mental and spiritual side, too.
Yeah, a lot of people find peace and clarity in those challenges. It's like a pilgrimage against this beautiful landscape.
That's what I love about this. We're not just learning facts. We're exploring different ways of seeing the world. But what about people who don't want to climb Mount Everest? What else can they do?
Well, they could go paragliding in Pokhara Valley. Imagine soaring above those lakes and fields with the Himalayas in the background.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I can see why pasted text uses words like exhilaration and awe. What else?
They also talk about ultralight flights, where you can fly right next to the Himalayas.
That gives me chills just thinking about it. But for people who want to stay on the ground, what can they do?
There's mountain biking. You can explore all the trails and see the diverse landscapes at your own pace.
That sounds great. Adventure and nature all in one.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Whitewater rafting and kayaking. Imagine going down those rapids, seeing the power of nature up close.
That sounds exhilarating. Like a real test.
It is. But like we said before, you have to approach any adventure with respect.
Absolutely. We need to be mindful of the impact we have and make sure we're taking care of the environment and the people. So to wrap up part one of our deep dive, what's the main thing you want our listeners to take away?
Well, pasted text says that Nepal is a place where natural beauty and the human spirit are intertwined. And it wants you to not just look, but to get involved, to connect, and to think about our place in nature.
That's a powerful message. So as we end this part of our deep dive, we want you to think about this. What can you do to bring that harmony with nature into your own life? It's something to think about. And maybe it'll even lead you on your own adventure. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back with part two soon.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Nepal. We've been talking about these incredible landscapes, but pasted text goes beyond that, It looks at how these landscapes have shaped the lives and traditions of the people there.
Right. It's not just about pretty pictures. It's about understanding a whole different way of life and how people view their place in the world.
Exactly. And one of the best ways to understand that is through their festivals and traditions. The source talks about how these celebrations really show how deep this reverence for nature is in their culture.
Okay, so what kind of festivals are we talking about?
Well, one that really stood out to me was Radha Machindranath. It's a month-long festival in the Kathmandu Valley.
A month? That's amazing. What's it all about?
It's dedicated to the god of rain and harvest. It shows how important agriculture and the natural world are to them. Pasted text describes these processions with these huge chariots that they pull through the streets, and there's music and dancing and offerings.
It sounds like a celebration of their connection to nature.
It is, and it's not just about asking for a good harvest. It's about acknowledging that delicate balance between humans and nature, which is so important for their survival.
So it's a way of showing respect for the things that sustain them.
Exactly. And this reverence for nature isn't limited to just this one festival. Pasted text also talks about Tihar, which is a 5-day festival of lights, and it's celebrated all over Nepal.
Okay. What's special about Tihar?
Well, each day is dedicated to honoring something different in nature and the relationships people have with those things. Like the first day is dedicated to crows.
Crows. Why crows?
Because they're seen as messengers of the gods. It's a reminder that every living thing has a role to play, even the ones we don't always think about.
That's interesting. What about the other days?
The second day is for dogs, to honor their loyalty. Then the third day is for cows, because they're important for providing food. The fourth day is for oxen, because of their strength and their help with farming. And then the fifth day celebrates family and community. It's all about being connected.
It's amazing how each day focuses on a different aspect of their relationship with nature, from animals to the land itself to human connection.
Right. And these festivals aren't just something from the past. They're still very much alive.
Yeah.
And they shape how people live their lives today.
It's a good reminder that respecting nature isn't just an idea. It's something you can live. But for people who aren't a part of that culture, it can be hard to know where to start.
I understand that. But pasted text actually offers some suggestions for how we can all connect with nature.
Okay, I'm listening.
Well, one of the simplest things is to just spend time outside.
That sounds easy enough.
Yeah,
But how do you actually do that?
just be intentional about it. Even if it's just for a few minutes every day, go for a walk in a park. Sit under a tree. Listen to the birds. Feel the sun on your skin.
So it doesn't have to be anything big, just small moments.
Exactly, and those small moments can make a big difference. You know they can help you slow down and de-stress and feel connected to something bigger.
Yeah, like hitting the reset button. What else?
Try engaging your senses when you're out there.
What do you mean by that?
Don't just look at things. Use all your senses.
So like, instead of just looking at a tree, I might touch the bark, smell the leaves, listen to the wind.
Exactly. Or you could walk barefoot on the grass and feel how cool and soft it is. Or close your eyes and just listen to all the sounds around you.
So it's about being present.
Right, and when you're more aware, you start to appreciate all the beauty and complexity of nature.
What else?
Learn about the natural world.
Do you mean like studying textbooks?
Not necessarily. Learning about nature can be fun. Like you could learn about the trees in your neighborhood, or the birds that come to your backyard, or the ecosystem you live in.
That's a great idea. It's like turning your own neighborhood into a classroom.
Yeah, and the more you learn, the more you understand how everything is connected. And that can lead to more respect for nature.
Okay, so we've got spending time outside, engaging our senses, and learning about nature. What else?
Try expressing your connection to nature through creativity.
Like painting a landscape.
That's one way. But there are lots of ways to be creative. Photography, music, gardening, even cooking.
So it's about finding your own way to connect with nature.
Right. And that creative process can be really helpful. It can help you process your emotions and connect with yourself and feel more at peace.
It's like taking inspiration from nature and turning it into something beautiful.
Exactly. And when you share that creativity, you can inspire others to connect with nature too.
Like we're all spreading the message of respect for nature.
Yeah, but it's important to remember that connecting with nature isn't always easy. Pasted text reminds us to be enthusiastic, but also cautious.
Right, we can't romanticize it too much. Nature can be dangerous.
Yeah, you need to be prepared. Do your research before you go. Know what the hazards might be, bring the right gear, and tell someone where you're going.
So no matter what you're doing, you need to be aware and prepared.
Absolutely. Respect the power of nature. And take steps to stay safe.
What are some things we can do to stay safe and protect the environment?
Pasted text talks about the leave no trace principle. Take all your trash with you. Stay on the trails. Be respectful of wildlife. Basically, be a good guest.
It's about understanding that we have a responsibility to take care of nature.
Right.
What about respecting wildlife?
Observe animals from a distance. Don't approach them or bother them. And don't feed them. It can disrupt their natural behavior.
So admire them from afar?
Yeah.
What about just being aware of our surroundings?
It's important to pay attention to the weather and the terrain and any potential hazards. Just be alert.
So even though nature's amazing, we need to be careful and respectful.
Exactly. And that brings us to a question for you to think about. What can you do to stay safe and protect the environment? It's something to think about. As we continue exploring Nepal.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Nepal. We've been talking about the landscapes and the people, but there's one more thing we need to talk about. Adventure.
Right. Pasted text really emphasizes that you're not just supposed to look at Nepal's beauty. You're supposed to experience it, to get out there and have an adventure.
Okay, I like the sound of that. What kind of adventures are we talking about?
Well, it starts with the classics, you know? Trekking and mountaineering. It talks about the Annapurna and Everest regions. They're like world-famous destinations.
Yeah, but it's not just about being strong and fit, right? It's got to be a mental and spiritual thing, too.
Absolutely. Pasted text says that a lot of people find peace and clarity when they're out there facing those challenges. It's like connecting with nature and yourself on a deeper level, almost like a pilgrimage, but with amazing views.
I love that. You know, we're not just learning facts. We're thinking about different ways of seeing the world. But what about people who aren't ready to climb Mount Everest? What else can they do?
Well, pasted text talks about paragliding over the Pokhara Valley, soaring above those lakes and fields, with the Himalayas in the background.
That sounds incredible, like something out of a movie.
It is. They use words like exhilaration and awe to describe it.
I can see why.
What else?
They also mention ultralight flights, where you can basically fly right next to the Himalayas. Imagine that, feeling so small next to those massive mountains. Wow, that's powerful. But what if you want to stay on the ground?
Well, there's mountain biking. You can ride through the forests and over the mountains
Yeah,
at your own pace.
that sounds like a great way to see everything.
Well,
Oh, and of course, there's whitewater rafting and kayaking on those powerful rivers. Imagine going down those rapids, feeling the force of the water.
that sounds intense.
It is. But like we've been saying, you have to respect nature when you're having these adventures.
Right. We need to be mindful of our impact
Right.
and make sure we're protecting the environment and the people. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into Nepal, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
I think pasted text says it best. Nepal is a place where nature and humanity come together. It's not just a place to look at. It's a place to experience, to connect, and to learn from.
I think that's a great way to put it. So, as we end this episode, we want to leave you with this question. How can you bring that sense of harmony with nature into your own life? Thanks for joining us.